Their story became known all over the country, and soon, people from all over the world were rallying behind them, calling for Spike to be returned to his rightful owners. Their tale had touched the hearts of many, and they became the subjects of many news stories and documentaries. In the end, their story had a happy ending. After months of campaigning, the authorities finally relented, and Spike was returned to Big Dan and Jotty John. The three of them were once again reunited, and they lived out the rest of their days in peace, surrounded by their beloved animals and with a newfound sense of hope for the future. Fat Dan and Jai John were both sentenced to prison in HMP Bedford for their involvement in an online trolling ring. They were placed in a tiny cell together, barely large enough to fit the two of them, let alone their pet commando dragon dog. Despite the cramped conditions, they quickly became attached to their new companion and spent most of their time training and playing with the dragon dog. Although they were both serving time, Fat Dan and Jai John remained optimistic and even managed to find a sense of humor in their situation. They joked about the absurdity of being cellmates with a commando dragon dog and laughed at their own predicament. Despite their light-hearted moments, the reality of their situation eventually set in. They had been caught and punished for their illegal actions, and they knew they had to take responsibility for their behavior. With their loyal pet by their side, they resolved to use their time in prison to reflect on their choices and make better decisions in the future. One day, while they were in the exercise yard, they met a fellow inmate named Jake, who had a reputation for being an expert at picking locks. The four of them became fast friends, and they started plotting their escape. After weeks of careful planning, Jake managed to pick the lock of their cell. With Spike leading the way, they snuck past the guards and made their way to the prison yard. Using Spike's incredible strength and agility, they scaled the prison walls and escaped into the night. They made their way through the countryside, with Spike leading the way and protecting them from danger. Eventually, they made it to a remote farmhouse, where they could lay low and plan their next move. They knew they were still in danger, but with Spike by their side, they felt invincible. They knew they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. After escaping from HMP Bedford, Fat Dan, Jotty John, and Spike went on the run. They knew they had to keep a low profile to avoid being caught by the police, so they moved from place to place, never staying in one location for too long. However, despite their efforts to evade the law, the police eventually caught up with them. They had been tracking the fugitives' movements and managed to corner them in a remote farmhouse. As the police approached the farmhouse, Fat Dan, Jotty John, and Spike made a desperate attempt to escape. They ran out the back door and into a nearby field, but the police were hot on their heels. In the end, there was no escape. The police caught up with them, and Fat Dan, Jotty John, and Spike were all arrested and taken back into custody. Their escape attempt had been in vain, and they were left to face the consequences of their actions.